high fructose corn syrup, concentrated orange juice, citric acid, a bunch of other stuff. Makes a delicious energy drink.
And with that particular tincture, welcome to this week's episode of the 800's. I'm your host, Alex, and you just heard from my lovely co-host, Adam, and a special shout out to Alan behind the scenes making this all happen. Mostly on time. It's not his fault this time, it's us. Again, thanks for joining us and for your patience. We had a couple weeks off, and it's good to be back. So let's roll right into our plugs for the week.
Yes, definitely. Glad to be back. Thanks for bearing with us with all of our schedule changes. We're happy to finally make one happen. I had a bunch of things happen last couple times we've tried to do this, but we're back on track now. If you showed up beforehand, you heard some music. That music was Fearless First from Incompetech. They have a lot of cool tunes and music. You should check them out. We use them for our D&D podcast. They got a lot of cool stuff for that. And anything you need some ambiance for, go to incompetech.filmmusic.io to get their full library. Also, we have Patreon. Patreon is how we decide what book to read next, as well as pay the bills. If you want to help us pay some bills, check out Patreon. The link is below the video. Select that, $2, get you the right to vote on what we do next. And YouTube. YouTube link is also below the video. We post all of our videos to YouTube, so you should check out our YouTube channel there. That's DM's Table on YouTube. And finally, I just want to give a quick shout out to Audible. Audible is how I personally listen to every book that we do here. I'm a big fan of audiobooks, and you should check out audiobooks too. If you want a 1-month trial with one free book, you can go to dmstable.com/audible, and that'll get you an affiliate link thing, and we'll get kudos from Audible, and you'll get a free book. So check it out today.
All right, so this week on the 800's, we will be discussing our book for Women's Month. And that book is The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. This novel revolves around the lives of several women separated by over 200 years. Their stories become interwoven when the heartbroken Caroline visits London in search of distraction and answers. Caroline stumbles upon a glass vial engraved with what looks to be a bear. Her first clue in finding answers to a series of centuries-old murders, her own internal strife, and the lost apothecary.
Good summary there, Alex.
Yeah, that was my second writing of that one, too. It accidentally got deleted, so I'm glad it came out pretty well anyway.
If this is your first time joining us tonight, I'll give you a quick rundown of how things work. We are a community talk show. So we want to hear from you guys. We don't want to just sit here and talk back and forth. The best way to make this show entertaining is with commentator participation. So if you have something you want to talk about in regards to the book at any time, go ahead and pop that into chat, whether it be a question you have about the book, a topic that you want to discuss, or maybe just a plot point that you thought was neat and would like to discuss. Throw that in chat, and we'll put it up on the big screen to give a chat about. While you guys are answering questions that we're on, Alex and I will talk back and forth about our own answers for the question, and then we'll take a look at chat and see what chat thinks. So comment away.
And as always, quick reminder that this show is geared towards adults. We do cover adult themes, topics, and while we try not to rely too much on swearing, it does fucking happen sometimes. So bring kids around at your own discretion, but also we're trying to create a fun and supportive community over at DM's Table that allows people to explore any of their hobbies or interests without any fear of judgment or anything like that. So please, just for the love of whatever you believe in, be nice or just fuck off.
And with that, let's get things rolling. Um, Initial thought. What were your first thoughts of the book?
Um, it was a lot more compelling than I was expecting for the kind of pace it has right up front. Uh, I was not expecting quite the romance element to it. It's definitely not a romance book like we discussed when we did our romance weekend in February, but like that element I wasn't expecting to be played up as much, nor was I expecting to be as intrigued by it as I was. Maybe because they're pulling at like some pretty intense emotional heartstrings. If you've ever been cheated on or anything, it's hard not to get invested in that. But seeing it from a woman's point of view, knowing what that's like getting a better view of like what that's like and what compels her to not just go to London, but to continue following up on these mysteries is not what I would have expected, but it was because it was unexpected that I found it really interesting. Uh, like especially the description of why Caroline likes history is like the finding the little things and connecting lives through the day to day rather than what we typically think of history as being like the big dates, wars, etc. It's the little day to day stuff that winds up being this really compelling mystery and story. So it was kind of fun to take a kind of slow-ish but compelling pace and have that female perspective of what it means to get over heartbreak and at the same time explore history in a way that I'm not typically used to. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique look at how we view the past and what even the simplest of items could potentially mean if you dig into their origin and the interactions those objects experienced in the past. It was kind of I thought it was kind of a neat and intriguing idea of there's this whole story that happened and it can all be connected to this one little bottle that was at one point thrown into a river. So
But it was
yeah,
thrown into a really big river.
yeah. But yeah, I agree. Really intriguing way to start the story. Had me hooked, wanting to know more about what exactly this mysterious apothecary that doesn't exist anymore. Uh, what the whole deal with that is. So it's cool start to the book.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, it looks like V.S. Drake agrees that it drew them in, and they also like the purely female point of view. Uh, and yeah, we'll get into the end a bit later, V.S. Drake. Don't worry. But for now, we're still working. We're just making our way through first impressions. And I was curious. I know you mentioned like that the historical perspective, but what did you think about having? Sorry. Yes, we will, V.S. Drake. We will. Uh, when it comes to having an all female point of view, like having multiple, what did you think about the use of three separate characters having their points of view and having them all be women? And like, what was your take on just like the use of POV by the author?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting and a really unique way to express different maturity levels across the same kind of story. You obviously had the immature view of the 12-year-old who was experiencing everything for the first time. The middle-aged view of, gosh, I forget her names. Names are slipping because it's been a while since this
So
book.
which one are you talking about though?
The current time lady,
Caroline.
Caroline, had the view of Caroline, where her heartbreak was fresh. It just happened. She still hadn't experienced a lot of life, but obviously more than a 12-year-old. And then you had the view of the scorned old lady who experienced it all and was sick of the world. So
Nella. Yeah.
yeah, it was kind of interesting how of the viewpoints we get, you get very different views, all with kind of the same experience in terms of like either heartbreak or abuse by a man.
Oh, and I absolutely agree. Having, I think it was a smart choice to, like you said, give kind of like not just multiple views from a time like chronological perspective, but like an age perspective, levels of maturity, and you know, it was interesting. And I'm going to bring this up because V.S. Drake did is like how they had something in common, not just in like where they were, because they obviously, even though it stretches across time, it's all in London,
Yeah,
or like the things that they were interacting with, like again the vial, but they had things in common personality wise, but were still distinctly their own people. They had, as you said, they had all experienced some kind of trauma in relation to interactions with men. It was very different, but it had kind of a similar effect on all of them in that they had something to overcome because of it, and it drove their like their at least their current life decisions for better or for worse, and how they reacted to it differently tells this story. And I thought it was the other thing that was really smart because we've seen in this, you know, on the show before, where when you use multiple viewpoints, it can be really tricky not to have them bleed together too much, and like you start getting a little repetitive in your storytelling. And there is just the right amount of overlap in this, but just enough separation that even when you're dealing with Nella and Eliza, the two in the past, when there is overlap, they're not really typically retelling the same thing. You're getting that different perspective, and it's usually when it's covering chronologically the same time. They've moved on to something else, but they're looking back on it and giving that perspective. And I thought it was very subtly but well done, kind of striking that balance because again, it's very easy to get repetitive. We've had books that have done that, and
yeah.
so I've grown to really appreciate when that nuance is there in that type of storytelling. And um, it was also really smart in the way that uh, Sarah Penner used the characters to build on each other's story. Everything kind of like it moved fairly seamlessly together for the most part. And I thought that, to me, that takes like some good planning and obviously good storytelling to be able to do that.
So, what didn't you like about the book?
All right. What I didn't like, and I'm not going to start with it because I have similar thoughts as V.S. Drake. The end was not my favorite, but I want to talk about something uh, else first. Um, One of the things I didn't like is the kind of thing that we talked about where there were certain decisions that were made, in particular when Caroline is taken in by the police, that didn't make sense to me. Uh, I was not really sure like why she didn't just lead with her obvious alibi, and like why she was hesitant to be like, oh, well, I've been doing research. There's somebody who can corroborate the story, but it took the phone call. And I guess, yeah, in those situations when you are surrounded by the cops in a foreign country, that's scary and you might freak out and forget stuff. But I don't know. It just maybe because I'm outside of it, but like when I was reading it, I was like, this feels like a bit of a pull for, just drama for drama's sake, and it didn't necessarily need to be in there, you
Yeah,
know? especially the lying to and the lying to the girl that she was Gaynor, the one that
Hmm.
she was working with at the library. I didn't fully understand why she was lying so much about that. Like and I'm getting pretty nitpicky about it, because this is pretty minor. Because again, that could easily be explained by I'm freaked out in a very new situation after just having, found out I'm being accused of attempted murder. Um, and it's, again, it's very minor. But then at the end, I don't know, it felt a little dissatisfying the way it ended, and I even now I'm struggling to figure out exactly why. I think it's because the rest was so compelling to have it end on this kind of like fairly flat note. Kind of felt, I don't know. Yes, please, yes, Greg, tell me why. Uh, and I'm gonna have that Backstreet Boys song stuck in my head now. But anyways, why don't you go ahead and answer Adam, and while VS Drake writes up his answer, what was something that you didn't like?
Yeah, I definitely had a similar take with the police scene. Like, if she decided to talk to the police without a lawyer, by the way, um, like, it seems like she would have wanted to lay a strong foot forward, because her whole motive for talking to them without a lawyer was, I want to get out of this as soon as possible so that I can go make sure my husband's still alive.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead, she's trying to tell half truths to keep herself from potentially a trespassing charge, and I don't know. The whole thing was super shady. like just get it out there and get it over with and move on with your life. Um,
Yeah.
similar theme with that. The whole thing where nobody explained to the 12-year-olds how period works.
That I can kind of explain in a historical context is just something that when it uh, at least my understanding of historical context is like that was something especially during like the Victorian era in like the 1700s, or I think actually that's the Elizabethan era, but um, in that time that stuff typically wasn't talked about until it happened. And you have to remember this girl is being raised in a home. Well, she's working in a home after having been raised by a mother who sent her off, who for whatever reason chose not to tell her about it because she was too young. And then like in those years where she would have been old enough to understand but young enough not to have dealt with it yet, she was being taken care of by an employer who didn't, like may not have thought to do that, but especially considering that historically speaking, they just didn't talk about that stuff. um,
I don't know. To me, her employer sounded like they had that kind of relationship where she understood that because she employed a 12-year-old, that she was kind of stepping in as guardian for her. And to
yeah,
see her freak out because she's bleeding and then be like, "Oh, well, bye." Like, what?
yeah, it seemed like there was kind of an assumption on her part, and you're right, it is a little bit lazy in that regard of, uh, it was just kind of like, oh, well, yeah, it's perfectly natural. Somebody will tell you about this, but not me. Bye. um,
I don't know, that part just rubbed me wrong, just because one, it kept being brought up, and B, it seemed like somebody should have explained it to her.
Yeah, I agree. I did keep thinking about that, but I kept dismissing it as a historical context. But again, I was not there. I'm not a historian, so I don't know if day to day stuff. I know, like in polite company, you might not talk about that stuff, but considering the situation, just saying there, it's all natural, and then just noping the fuck out, like.
Yeah.
Even if there was like I get that there's also like a murder having happened just nearby, but there was no follow-up, I think, was the thing that got me. That was the thing I was just like, maybe there would be. And even Nella didn't do that great of a job when she finally figured it out. Like,
Yeah.
it just kind of got thrown out there, and I thought there was going to, given like the confusion, I thought there was going to be more of an explanation given. And while there was more than what the mistress gave, there wasn't that much more.
Yeah.
Then again, I've never been a part of one of those talks, so I don't know what they look like between women, honestly. You
Yeah.
know,
I've never been part of one either. So,
but
any,
let's get around to V.S. Drake, though. The menstruation section of V.S. Drake, yeah, we understand why it was there and what it drove that internal conflict. It's just the way it was handled maybe could have been a bit more nuanced or like changed a bit so that it didn't feel rushed or just dismissed. Because, and probably in part, at least for me, because it was such a big thing. Uh, but what was the part that we were talking about here? Oh yeah, that the reason why that end segment is a little dissatisfying, at least according to V.S. Drake, is that it was ended in it was all a dream style. Uh, yeah, it does kind of undercut it in that same way, where it takes the something that is a fantastic story and is just like, well, it might have happened, maybe, kinda. Who knows? Or, it does kind of cut the legs out from under it a little bit. So I get that. Um, Still not sure if that's what I was feeling about it. I mean, it definitely has that feel. I don't know. I'm having trouble identifying like where I'm actually like what's the catalyst for that for me. But that's just my experience of the book. Did you have any issues with the ending, Adam?
um, not personally. I mean, at that point, the story was pretty much wrapped. Say yes. uh, I do agree that it felt out of character. I feel like that it was the turning point in her life, and that she would have wanted to keep it to feel like as a reminder to always chase your dreams, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at that point, everything had pretty much been resolved. She had decided to pursue her new life, and she had finished her research on the Lost Apothecary. So, in a way, I can understand it because it was like, okay, I'm moving on. I don't need this anymore. It's just the thing that helped me get to where I am today. But honestly, this is the most I've thought about it. So,
Hey, that's for having just thought about it, it's a pretty well thought out answer. Uh, V.S. Drake is mentioning, yeah, that was her supposed golden ticket to the university, and she was getting in her own way again. Yeah, I think that's more what it was for me. Is just like I didn't understand why in that sense when like she spent the whole book coming to that conclusion, and then it was like, yeah, I totally understand your point, Adam, about it being valid of like this is my sign of I'm moving on to the next thing, but in the same vein, she is kind of throwing away her next thing, and it I didn't, yeah, that I didn't get. It was just like, it, you know what it was? Is it just kind of cuts out the character growth like pretty significantly. It was like, why? She's clearly not a dumb character. Like, you'd think after all of that, okay, yeah, I think I finally identified why. Is it just like it undercuts the character growth is the reason why it bothered me. It is that's what I disliked about it. hopefully there's a follow-up book to this that shows that there's some kind of resolution that we are not seeing. Like maybe she doesn't need the vial itself and she has enough with all of her other shit or what have you. But unless we get that, I'm going to continue to be like, yeah, it probably could have been handled better.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we can move on to our next topic. One of the things I wanted to talk about was specifically what did you think about the
Book
what
nerd
book nerd rage? What did you think about the three characters themselves? Like, let's talk about the two in the past. What did you think about Nella and Eliza? Since we've done quite a bit of talking about Caroline so far.
Eliza, I think, was perfectly written for a 12-year-old in terms of being kind of annoying and nosy. I thought she stayed true to her character throughout. Nella, I don't know. You don't get a whole lot of details about Nella because she's like a closed book. You know, she kind of just exists to exist at this point. I enjoyed the slow reveal of her past. I thought that was really well written. Yeah, I of the two, Eliza obviously gets a lot more detail thrown in, and I think both of them were really well written.
You know, I would slightly disagree with the part about Nella just existing to exist. I think what she was essentially she was written as a character that was meant to carry the strife of women at that time as like that's what she existed to be, is like, I am this counterpoint that lets you see how desperate things could get for women at that time. If they're coming to somebody to literally murder people to fix their problems because they have no other recourse, like, that says a lot of, I think that did a lot of like very subtle but powerful world building in like giving a historic, without giving like a historical context of, that required full on narration, I guess. There was no narrator coming out. It was 1791 in London, England, and women were supremely oppressed. So it allowed for like this it's this implication that things were pretty desperate for women sometimes, and that it took something like a dedicated shot for these women, for them to have any sort of recourse in their lives or feel any sense of power or agency. And yeah, and that's also what she served in. That comes a bit later via Drake, where she is kind of this manifestation of what it means to be oppressed and abused by men. And that doesn't come until what you mentioned, Adam, later on when her like past is revealed. And that I thought it was really smart the way that her realizations at the very end of the book were handled as well. Like that, I really like that she came to that realization that having dedicated her last 20 years to revenge didn't really help at all. It just kind of muffled the pain, and when she finally looked past it, realized that it had never left and it had been like literally and figuratively killing her.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool, a really cool way to handle character growth for a character who dies at the end. Like it was weird. I was weirdly okay with her dying because of that. I wasn't frustrated with it. She didn't have to die a martyr. She didn't have to die as a symbol, and she got clarity, which I thought was really well handled and fit her character well too. You know,
Yeah.
and as you both said with, as you and V.S. Drake said with Eliza, she was super well written for a 12-year-old. I actually really liked that she was just like, she had that, yeah, you're older, but I know better than you attitude that kept her holding on to like the magic is real thing. Because I've met a number of 12, like 10, 12-year-old girls, and well, it's 10 or 12-year-olds, it doesn't matter if they're boys or girls, just that's a thing. It's like, until something proves otherwise, I know better than you. And
V.S. Drake, I mean, allegedly, Eliza saves her.
yeah, allegedly. But like, I'm talking about that moment of like where our specific knowledge of what happens to her ends is like she can be presumed. Well, I mean, I guess she could be Schrodinger's woman, but both dead and alive at the same time. Uh, but still, having a character that that even thinks that they're gonna die, having that clarity to like have find those answers was, I don't know. It felt really satisfying to me anyway, as far as like character development goes. And that's the other thing is all of these characters got some level of it. They were treated with a lot of care, and I appreciated that, especially these women in the past who felt, despite being separated from us by 200 years plus, felt very real and relatable.
Yeah. Let's go to V.S. Drake's question.
Okay,
What did you think of how suspense was used in the book?
I think that from a writing perspective, it was done pretty well, but because we read a lot of books, it wasn't super suspenseful for me because I was predicting stuff way ahead of time, and pretty accurately so. Um, I thought it was well used because where I saw it happening, it was not like in your face, but it was definitely there. It was just building tension in certain points, and I actually really like the way that Sarah Penner, like the versatility of the way that she used the tension. Is it wasn't just I'm gonna build to this climax. She used the tension to build. She used that suspense to build tension between characters, between different storylines, and the overarching story as well. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what V.S. Drake just put out there. The question of, is the apothecary still around today? I very much had that same thought. I really wanted to know, we obviously, Caroline, that's her name, right?
Yeah.
Caroline finds the apothecary at one point, and it was very clearly dilapidated and unused building. So obviously the apothecary is not there anymore, but does Eliza take over the apothecary's job? Does she take over poisoning people? What happens in the end? Do they get arrested? There's a lot of what's going to happen involved. In the modern day story too, you had a lot of what's going to happen? Are they going to get back together? Is Caroline going to figure out to put herself first? Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Well, sorry. Something caught my throat, but I I thought that part of the tension, like part of the suspense about like what V.S. Drake is talking about when it comes to like the apothecary existing into the present. I only had that thought for a very brief moment, but what changed my mind pretty quickly was like that next chapter, when we like really first see how the apothecary works after that meeting that V.S. Drake is talking about. Uh, we go into the details of like how these women actually come about being there, what and how the apothecary, Nella, records everything, and that it has to be women coming to her, and it's only against, it's never against other women. Um, because of those rules, I did kind of think to an Assassin's Creed type of thing, and I was like, well, would it have changed that much in 200 years to the point where they're taking action without the women asking for the help?
Yeah.
And that's where I started to dismiss it. I mean, yeah, the rules could have slipped. I just didn't see any reason story-wise why they would have until like a little bit towards the end, but it would have been too late for that anyway. In knowing that, like, I thought Eliza, like from the beginning, was going to be the one who jumped off the bridge in the story. Um, like as soon as I knew she was a character, I just it like it seemed she seemed the type of character like that would get mixed up in that. It didn't happen exactly how I predicted, but you know, because I thought she was going to die, that just never popped into my head because if somebody was going to change the rules, it would have been Eliza, but I didn't think she was going to live. So, um, I guess that stuff never popped into my head, but it is a cool bit of suspense that, because of the way I thought about things, I might have missed out on that I think other people would really appreciate is just not knowing where it's going to go from there.
Yeah.
But I am with V.S. Drake. I'm actually glad there wasn't an underground society because that it almost feels like that this would be like less of a novel and more of a prequel to a bigger series, and it totally changes what this is about. It makes it more about the society rather than the lives of these women.
Yeah. What did you think of Nella's reversal on agreeing to poison a woman?
That one was actually a little tough to stomach, but I think it was really well written, the conflict that she went through to arrive at the answer that she did. Uh, I don't know that I necessarily would have made the same choice, but I also didn't have those really deep connections to the apothecary itself. Like if I were in her shoes, I probably would have been like, well, we're done here, packed up all my shit and left, you know. But I also probably wouldn't have been poisoning people for 20 years either. So, for a character who is that attached to that, like it is her whole identity, I thought it was pretty well handled that like uh the internal struggle, and they gave a reason, a believable reason of why she was like, okay, I have to do this not for myself or for this woman, but I have to do this to preserve all these other women that whose will only exist because of what I do and how I record things. And yeah, that's also the thing that's fucking me over, but it's like that proved that that was the most important thing to her, and it shows how important that little register is. And I think it was kind of a powerful moment speaking to how easy it was for women's voices to be lost in the past to present day, is that the only person willing or able to record who these people were was somebody who was effectively a serial killer, but
Yeah.
somebody who dedicated her life to helping women from the shadows. And the fact that it had to be lost for 200 years and that it had to happen in the shadows as opposed to most history, which is supposed to be studied and just readily available, kind of shows how many stories out there, like it makes you think how many stories out there have gone untold, how many people who had an impact on the world were forgotten because they didn't fit the archetype of whoever historians were looking at. In particular, this happens a lot to women and minority groups wherever history is being recorded. And I thought that was pretty smartly done, showing that problem through that context.
Yeah, I really thought she was going to kill the lady who asked her to kill the other lady.
Yeah, I thought there was a chance of that too.
And I agree with Via Strake. It was pretty ironic that her original plan ended up going through. She killed the guy anyway. It's like, when I say I'm gonna kill someone, fate's on my side.
Yeah, there was kind of like a moment of vindication where you're just like, that's what you get for fucking with other women.
Yeah.
I mean, V.S. Drake, I did kind of get Sweeney Todd vibes, but I mean, part of that's because, London setting in very similar eras. However, I thought it was a little bit different because it was, Sweeney Todd himself was a bit more crazed than Nella was. Like his whole thing, Sweeney Todd always felt like the guy who snapped and was forever a I guess a sociopath, like somebody who just lashes out at the world. And Nella felt a lot more targeted than Sweeney Todd did, but like that's just, yeah, it is a spirit of vengeance thing. It's just the type of spirit and like the general feel for each of those spirits felt different to me. So like I drew the parallels, but I thought it was distinct enough for at least my taste.
Yeah. Sweeney killed anyone who walked in alone into his shop. Nella killed anyone who was being oppressed who came to her shop.
Well, she killed the people who were oppressing the people who came into her shop.
Yeah.
It was a lot more targeted. She didn't like seek out her victims, or she wasn't like just like, and like you said, it was kind of willy nilly with Sweeney Todd, so it's different, at least to us. Let's see here. What did you guys think, though, about how the situation was handled between Caroline and her husband?
I think her husband is a prick who took it too far. And obviously did not learn that the problem was that he was selfish and didn't communicate. The problem wasn't that his wife didn't care about him. It was that he was selfish and thought about only his own needs and didn't care about her.
Oh yeah, I straight up wanted to slap the motherfucker especially like a number of times, because I don't know, I predicted a little bit of the manipulation, just because I've seen patterns like that, and just like people have told me about people they've dated like that or married like that, and I was just like, I actually thought it was kind of interesting to see from a woman's perspective what it's like to be in it and to deal with these emotions that don't just go away, like the love for him, like that doesn't just fucking disappear, you know? And it was, I know it was pretty powerful to like see how well that was, like the nuance of that part was handled, at least on Caroline's point. And Sarah Penner did a good job of creating a guy who was just charming enough to like make it seem realistic that it would play out the way that it did, and it fit Caroline's character to be reticent to completely let go, to still care about him despite all of the bullshit of him manipulating her, not giving her the space that she asked for, which I get is hard when somebody you love asks for space, but sometimes you just gotta fucking give it to them.
Yeah.
And but yeah, that whole eucalyptus oil thing, that sent me over the edge. I'm like, I swear if I knew that dude in real life, I'd kick him in the nuts. Right in the nuts. Because that goes beyond just being manipulative. Like, that is like psychopathic. Like, even if he's taking that risk, like if he's done a risk analysis like that, the level of emotional manipulation in that is insane. And oh yeah, I was definitely relieved as well via Strike that they weren't pregnant. Like, I literally breathed a sigh of relief when that came out. I was like, oh my god. And I can, and I get that as men we can only really imagine what it's like to go through stuff like that, but at least from like a woman's perspective, this kind of gave a good look at like what it's like to experience that sort of trauma related to betrayal and what it means to like to show like where there's a difference between fighting for a relationship and being a manipulative asshole, and how that's experienced by people on the other side.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of people who do that sort of thing like on accident. Like, they think, oh, I'm going to show up because I'm fighting for the relationship, without the intent to necessarily manipulate the other person. And it, I just thought it was really interesting to see those perspectives, and I thought it was handled pretty well, especially considering the type of dude that she was dealing with. She was, I will say this though, Caroline is far more forgiving than I think I would have been as quickly as she was. And I know that forgiveness isn't about him, but the dude fucking tried to kill himself to keep her, like fake kill himself to keep her around. Like, that would take me more than a day. I don't know about the rest of you.
Yeah, that was props to her for being like, I care about you even though you were a dick twice to me.
Yeah, I think that shows a level of complexity of character for like Caroline that I really appreciate in like protagonists. And it wasn't like a dumb decision either, which she does make some dumb decisions, but that wasn't one of them. There's a thought, there's a thoughtfulness to it. That's where her character growth comes from, is realizing that, oh, I don't need you to live my life. I don't need you to be hanging over me, so I'm going to forgive you and just move on, because that's what we both need. And, it's a powerful message for sure. And it just happened so fast, it felt like freaking whiplash. But that's just my personal style of dealing with things. I get not everybody's like that. But why don't we turn a bit to, what are your thoughts on V.S. Drake's latest comments, especially how the book treated men?
Yeah, I agree. I think it walked a fine line there, and did well to show that just because the book is acknowledging that there are men out there that are pigs and trash, that doesn't mean all men are pigs and trash.
Mm-hmm.
To think of a few, the mudlarking guy, was pretty great. Very friendly and very supportive of Caroline's wishes to learn more about the bottle, especially considering he used his own family member for said source of additional knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah. And I too agree that like it is a tough line to walk to bring up these issues without innately making people turn to that thought of, oh, well, this is just a man-hating book. It absolutely wasn't. You know, each of these men that did something, it was very particularly handled, what they did, how they affected the women, and why they were reacting the way that they were. And because those individual storylines are handled so well, you can treat them as individual storylines rather than generalizing. In fact, I think it is very difficult in this book to generalize, in part because you, like you just said, Adam, like you do have a character or two out there who subverts that expectation, and he's like the whole reason Caroline found herself, essentially. Is he just all he did was encourage a hobby that he loves and he thought she would love, and like she showed interest in as well. And it shows how you can have, you know, these positive platonic interactions between men and women that have nothing, like, that don't take away from the woman in any way, you know, and don't necessarily make the story about the man either, you know. So, because that's the other thing I've seen before, is there's some people who try to like bring in their exception, but the exception turns the story, and at least for that time makes it about the man, not, and like that kind of subverts what they're trying to do. And that wasn't the case in this book, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. I had one more question, but I'm blanking on the name of the person I want to talk about. Do you have anything else you wanted to talk about specifically, Adam? Or
I think we've hit all the topics I had in mind tonight.
Okay. I wanted to talk about. Oh man, this is like the biggest brain fart I've had since. Well, I mean, I know it was last time that we did this that we had that rough day, but like, holy heck. Yeah, because
like a month ago.
it was just one of those things when I was reading at the very end of the book. I was rereading it, and as I reread it, yeah, I'm working on talking through it via straight. But as I was rereading or re-listening to the end of the book, I wasn't able to get a hold of the physical copy this time. What did you think about how, like, female? Oh, that's what it was. What did you think about how like female friendships were relationships were handled in this book? My specific example, and this is what prompted this question towards the end, was like specifically like the relationship that develops between Gaynor and Caroline.
I don't know. I mean, Caroline and Gaynor's relationship was obviously very helpful to Caroline in understanding what she wants to do next with her life. I think it was a good thing that Gaynor didn't just blow her off when she showed up. That probably wouldn't have done well for Caroline figuring out what she wanted to do with her life. So good.
Well, I thought that it was kind of interesting to see how like the in how female like relationships were um portrayed in this, in that some of them were kind of a slow burn, like what happened between Eliza and Nella, and some of them were like those fast friends, like Caroline and Gaynor, and it showed like this different dynamic of how like women could support each other in various different ways, and how sometimes, you know, it's born out of something, I guess, literally toxic if we're talking about the apothecary. But is ultimately something that changes these women. And I think there's not always a lot of that in storytelling where women like lift each other up. There's a lot of like contention between them a lot of the time. We're gonna nix the example, well, not nix it, but like there's the obvious example of how like Nella and that one uh noblewoman or whatever who wants her to kill the mistress, uh, is an example of like, I think, a lot of typical interactions between um, that I see I think a little too often in storytelling, but how it was even in those situations that you had these kind of foils to that of like, oh, I'm not just in generally a bitchy woman who's a bitch to like everybody. I am like, you are trying to fuck with my shit, and I'm gonna be mean to you. But at the same time, I can keep my heart open to other people. And Caroline is in this situation kind of similarly, where she could easily close herself off, and it was really nice to have that kind of, again, foil character who comes in there and brings a little positivity into her life that is entirely platonic. And it would have been very easy for Gaynor to just kind of be a background like NPC who's just like, the librarian you go to get information. But no, she becomes this force for change in Caroline's life. And I like how pretty much every character that comes in has an impact, and an important one, even if they're not the main character. So like I really liked that was a part of it. V.S. Drake has a good point. Absolutely does kind of promote a sense of importance of community too.
Yeah.
Like having a tribe, is that you're not entirely reliant on your relationships. And I think that's an important piece of this for Caroline, as well as realizing that, yeah, I can build a life that doesn't need to be around a relationship. And I can embrace these other aspects of myself with other people, whether they be friends or not, but like, or friends or more. But, I thought it was really important to have those types of relationships in this book throughout, and that they were treated with care and not just kind of thrown in there to just be like, look, she's not alone. and, or she has this NPC to go to for something. Like, they were treated with care, and I think that's probably one of the better things about this book in general is the way that.
Sorry.
V.S. Drake is not gonna let that one go. Oh man. Aside from that one little bit, a lot of these characters are treated with care. And anyways, that was my last topic that I wanted to go over. Is there anything else in chat that anybody wants to talk about? And no, we're not going to rehash that same scene, V.S. Drake, unless you want something else in there. But if anybody else has anything, otherwise, we can probably, if you don't have anything, we can probably move into predict. Like, do you have any? I guess, do you have any predictions? Like, do you think this is it, or do you think there's another book, or?
I think this is it.
Yeah, I hope this is it, but I kind of like with V.S. Drake, I'm like, there's a smallish part of me that wants another one to be in there just for the sake of being able to kind of retcon the end. But
Yeah.
Or at least give me some closure and say that like she still gets to go to grad school or something. Like, because that's the other thing I know that was kind of handled weirdly was at the very end. She talks about, yeah, I applied to Cambridge, and they're treating it like she got in and she just applied.
Yeah.
Like it's a guarantee to get into one of the best universities in the entire world for a graduate program.
Well, I mean, obviously,
And
it's a
especially,
fictional story. You can make it happen whatever you want.
yeah, so it does get treated like she's already in, and um, I don't know, that was a little bit tough to swallow because I was just like, I've applied for grad school. I know what that's like. That is not an immediate process by any means. And
Especially for somebody who's been out of the game for what, a decade.
are you referring to you or me?
No, for Caroline.
Oh, for Caroline. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, for someone who's been like out of academia for like a decade, and yeah, I get she's got this story that could compel them, but it's also the other thing that threw me off is like knowing what you have to do for grad schools, and maybe I'm being a bit nitpicky about this because it was such a hassle for me when I did it. But when you're going into grad programs, a lot of what you're doing is finding professors that you are working with who want to work on similar projects or are willing to help you out because they're interested in what you're doing. And she's kind of taking a pretty big swing going into like an English literature program with a primarily history based um, angle
Yeah.
where I don't know. It just seems like it might be a bit. To me, it's not like the most direct way to get in, and it could be the uniqueness that would get her in. But I thought that was a bit of a stretch to be like celebrating because like I have a shoe in for this. Not necessarily. That's what got me is like just the way it was treated like kind of a shoe in, and I never really thought it was, but I'm also maybe a little pessimistic because applying for grad school for any of you out there is a pain in the ass.
I was kind of curious if Penner had any personal experience with grad school, but it looks like she just has a degree in finance from University of Kansas, so probably not.
Wait, so she was the husband?
Oh my
Oh
gosh.
boy. Oh man, yeah, I definitely wasn't expecting that. To know that she was, on the finance side of things. But hey, authors can come from all over the place. I guess we're just used to people coming in with their backgrounds and applying them a bit more directly. Um, Otherwise, though, why don't we go ahead and get into our final thoughts then?
Yeah, sure thing. Final thoughts. You want me to go first?
Yes. Jesus.
Okay. I liked the book. I had some gripes with it. Talked about lack of communication angle for a couple of different aspects in the book. But otherwise, considering it's not my usual forte, this book was interesting and compelling. I feel like the whole magic bit at the end that Eliza was kind of getting into with the tinctures and stuff was a little unnecessary and childish, but then again, Eliza was a child, so so okay. uh, I enjoyed the apothecary part. It was kind of interesting to get something that was probably a very, very realistic for the times back then, in terms of how people would handle different situations, such as needing some sort of medical assistance to get pregnant or control their flow at that time of month turned to murder. I felt like that was something that could be taken as real and not just fictional. So that was kind of neat. As far as whether or not I would recommend this book, I'm torn. I wouldn't not recommend it, but I don't know if I would ever be like, you should go read this book. So.
All right. So I have some similar but some different final thoughts on this. In general, I found this book to be pretty compelling. It was, I like historical fiction type of books, so this was kind of right up my alley. It had some elements that could use some fine tuning, like Adam just mentioned. The use of lack of communication is something that we have both found frustration with, not just in this book, but in, like, I guess life in general too, beyond books. And it's hard to reconcile that sometimes, but I really enjoyed how the care that most of these characters were taking was taken, like, for these characters throughout the book. The relationships all felt earned and honest from the perspective of the author. Obviously there's a lot of fucking dishonesty going on. But, like, none of it felt really forced or shoehorny type of, like, there's some, they're just being put together because it makes sense for the story. It makes sense for the characters too, and therefore makes even more sense for the story. And it is not an in-your-face action-y type of book, but it is interesting and intriguing throughout the vast majority of it. It does end a little bit in a way that I didn't like. I thought it could have been a bit stronger, and it felt like it kind of undercut, again, some of the character growth, but I've definitely seen a lot worse, and there's still the implication that she could still be pursuing the next stage in her life, specifically Caroline I'm talking about, but I think it's kind of meant for it to leave off on a note of we're not entirely sure, but I thought that could have been handled a bit differently. As for whether or not I would recommend this, I probably would, because I know a lot of people who like these kinds of stories. But I also know there's a group of people that I definitely wouldn't, because, like, they don't like these kinds of stories. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily not recommend it. Like Adam said, I might not go out of my way unless they tell me they're looking for something outside of, like, their usual go-to, And if they did, this would definitely be near the top of my list, because I thought it was really well done. I thought it was a really good book. It was pretty well written, and I like the characters, and I like the story.
Yeah, I agree with what V.S. Drake said too about this is a good book club book.
Yes, it absolutely is a good book club book. Yeah, so if you are running your own book clubs out there or anything, this would be one to bring in. And yeah, you don't have to be an adventurous reader to be into this sort of thing. You just have to be interested in these types of stories. Yeah, also join this book club every week that you possibly can.
I mean, obviously, because we did this book for our book club, that means we're a good book club, because we did this book that we suggested for book clubs.
And we're ahead of the curve. We did it before it was cool.
Yeah.
and we made it cool.
We're a hipster trend-setting book club.
Hey, I don't know too many other live stream book clubs out there. We kind of are.
All right, so next book's on the list. The one we know about already, which was originally supposed to be this week, but is now April 9th, is Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. And then the new book on our list for April 23rd is is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I have not read either of these.
Nor have I, and I'm looking forward to them. Moving forward, because of how we were off for a couple of weeks. Sorry, I'm just reading what V.S. Drake was putting in the chat. Made me giggle. Did we though? And yes, we did. V.S. Drake. We made it cool. So coming up, we are doing our celebration of National Book Month. That is through April, and to celebrate that, voting will be open to the public for our next 2 books. So bring your aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, moms, dads, neighbors, that one guy who you don't totally hate at work,
people who you run into in the library.
People you run into at the grocery store, just invite everybody. Invite them out. Everybody will get a chance to vote for our next books. We will be doing an open forum back to our original formula, so that is going to be any books that are recommended. If you have anything, send it to us. Otherwise, we will throw out a list from our currently compiled list of recommendations, and we hope to see you there. So if you select if you get people out here and get people voting, come and read the books with us, and we'll be reading those through May.
Yes, free entry to anyone who shares a picture of their cat or dog.
And free entry if you don't. So, but yeah, that's what we got going on for our votes through April and into May. If you don't necessarily have a book recommendation, but there's a type of book or a theme you would like to see us explore for our upcoming books, please feel free to, throw that in chat or get us on our socials. Speaking of which, Adam, what are they?
Oh my gosh. So happy you asked.
Segue.
First, let me tell you about dmstable.com. dmstable.com is where we post everything, because that's who we are. We are dmstable.com. So if you need any information about who we are or what we do or any other project that we are involved with, go to dmstable.com. YouTube, we post all these videos on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. Links below the video. Patreon, also below the video today. That's how we make money, so that we can host things and have servers and databases. So check out Patreon. And that's how we vote too. So go there to vote. Socials directly. We use Facebook and Twitter primarily. Facebook is at the DMs table, and Twitter is at DMs table. Both of those are linked below the video. We also are pretty active on our Discord server. The Discord server is not just books, though. It's everything nerdy. 3D printing, D&D, books, everything that you could think of or want to talk about. There's somebody there that'll talk to you about that. So if you wanna join, hit us up on our socials, Facebook or Twitter.
Yeah, we'd love to have any and all of you over there. Thanks again to everybody for coming out tonight and for being patient with us over the last couple of weeks, between me being pretty sick last week and Alan being out the week before. And we know that we try not to postpone too often, but life happens, and we're human. But thanks for sticking around with us, and it's a lot of fun having you all out here and having an active, thanks V.S. Drake for always being active in our chat, and hoping to see more of you in the coming weeks.
Yes, thank you guys for coming tonight and for coming in future nights, because you totally will, because we're awesome and entertaining.
You are getting very reedy.
I must read this book.
And with that, see you next book, everyone.